Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Osborne Pro TV. My name is Rob, and today I'm going to show you how to better secure your Windows 10 operating system. I put together a script I call Harden Windows 10, and this enables all these protections that I'm going to briefly cover. And this way you don't have to do them all manually on your own. It's a nice quick way to set up your operating system. So first thing I'm going to cover is the WDIGEST cache. This is not enabled by default on Windows 10. It is enabled by default on Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. You cannot disable this on Windows 7. You can disable this on Windows 8 and 8.1 and Windows 10, of course. The value does not exist in Windows 10 by default, so we're going to set it anyway, just to turn it off. And to show what that does is using a tool called Mimikatz, we can see that the WDIGEST hash value, or it doesn't even have a hash value, the password is just stored in clear text for the user. So that is why we want to disable that. We also, if you can avoid it, you don't want to store saved credentials on a machine. However, sometimes this is unavoidable. You can see we have an NTLM hash here as well as a SHA hash. So basically we want to ensure the use of NTLM version 2 is used and not NTLM. This also prevents pass the hash attacks, and also hashes, if the password is not strong enough, can be cracked. And here, just using an online tool, we can see that the cracked password is viewable for this one. Another thing I'm going to mention while I'm looking at this is YouTube does not allow you to do hacking tutorials, so I'm just kind of covering the information on why we're setting up the protections that we are setting up, rather than doing a demonstration on how to get the information. So that is that part. Another thing I want to cover is with AUTOLOGON here, what we're doing is just to cover that script, AUTOLOGON password check. So in the Windows registry, if you have AUTOLOGON set up where you start up your computer and it just signs in automatically, you don't want to do this because, for one, that password is stored in clear text in the registry. So to compensate for that, we can use a Windows SYSINTERNALS tool, and it is called AUTOLOGON. And the way this works, I'm going to have a link to this in the description, is you just simply click on the application to run it. If your password's in clear text, it will load it, and you may need to enter it yourself. Simply click Enable, and it will basically encrypt the password so that it's not in clear text and easily viewable in the registry for you. Also, with the AUTOLOGON, let me go back here. Notice here I checked the registry value again. Default password no longer exists, and that's because that gets renamed. The next thing to cover here is in Harden Windows 10 we have WDIGEST AUTOLOGON. Now we're on Always Install Elevated. What this permission is, it's not enabled by default, I believe, in Windows 10 anymore. But I'm disabling it just to make sure it's disabled. This is basically this defense in depth, I guess you can call it. But what this is, if this is enabled, it gives a normal user with average permissions the ability to install an MSI file, and they can install that with system permissions. So an attacker can, of course, use this to elevate their own permissions as system or administrator permissions. And it's a privilege escalation method, not an access method. Same thing here for WSUS is a Windows update hosting service, so I can use a WSUS server to host Windows updates. If we're allowing HTTP, this can be exploited by an attacker to have malicious applications downloaded from and executed from whatever they're hosting. So that is why we want to ensure that HTTP access for WSUS is not allowed. Here, SSDP, this is a protocol that's able to be used by Windows, Linux, Apple. It's a universal kind of protocol. And anything using this protocol is there's no form of integrity or authentication behind it. Basically, anything can communicate that way. Typically, for example, evil-SSDP, this is a tool that can be used to exploit this protocol and host a service, for example, under the network section in File Explorer. And an attacker can have this look nice by putting, for example, an Office 365 logo, maybe calling it your Office 365 backups, tricking, hopefully not tricking, but it could trick someone into clicking there, and then entering their credentials to sign into the device, when really what they're doing is giving the attacker their own credentials. So typically this doesn't get used by Windows 10. To show you, here in my control panel, devices and printers, all these multimedia devices here are advertising their SSDP protocol so that my device can communicate with them if it wants to over that protocol. So that is why we're disabling that service, and we're stopping it and disabling it. With SMB, this is anything that you use in File Explorer to access possibly other machines in your device. As such, we're disabling SMB version 1. SMB version 1 is vulnerable to the WannaCry vulnerability, which is a ransomware thing. And basically the protocol is outdated. You're not going to be using it anymore, especially in a home environment. Chances are everything's already moved to SMB version 2 and 3. If you're in a domain, this may not be the case for you. So I would suggest watching my Securing SMB video, where I cover the event logs to look for, so you can see what is still using that old version. But in your home environment, it's good to disable that and enable SMB version 2 and 3, as well as requiring SMB signing so that there's a form of integrity anytime someone possibly tries to access your home computer over the SMB protocol. Now, DNS, I cover this in another video as well, where I show how to capture an NTLM hash because the NetBIOS service is enabled. So here what we're doing is disabling NetBIOS. We're disabling the use of the LM host file, and this is because that can be used to create DNS cache poisoning. And we're also enabling DNS over HTTPS in the Windows and on the Windows device wherever possible. And the reason for that is to give you another form of privacy. This way your internet service provider is not able to see your DNS queries in clear text. They're encrypted using TLS version 1.2. RDP here, basically what we're doing is I ask you if you want to enable RDP access to your computer. If you say yes, we secure it using network level authentication and enabling it on the firewall. I cover this in my Securing DNS or Securing RDP video as well. We're also disabling remote assistance, and this is because you may be familiar with adware that pops up on your computer saying your computer has a virus and that you need to call this phone number to get it taken off. If you call that number, they can offer you remote assistance, and that in a domain environment, you may even be offered remote assistance by an attacker with a custom message saying, I need to remote into your computer. Is this okay with you? And then if the user clicks OK, the attacker now has access to the device. So that is RDP with SSL. RDP I've showed in my Securing RDP video. How to set up RDP to use SSL or TLS, I should say, really. They're the terms are interchangeable in the IT world, but however, SSL is an expired protocol where TLS is the new one. And what we're doing here for SSL is we're disabling the weak cipher suites, such as DNS. I have been fairly lenient here. We disable the use of null ciphers, DES ciphers. DES is the 56-bit key one, and not being gone through a max of 3 times. We also have our RC4 ciphers, or ARC4. Those are all disabled because those are all weak and no longer used. And we enable AES 128, which is me being lenient, and AES 256. We also disable old SSL versions, SSL 2, SSL 3, TLS 1.0, and being lenient, we're enabling TLS 1.1. However, on your home computer, you're typically only using these in your web browser, so 1.2 and the newest version, 1.3, should be more than pretty much everything you're using. Now, these TLS protocols are basically the use of server certificates to encrypt communication. So this we've set up with RDP over SSL in other videos, DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS, anything that uses this protocol. HTTP over HTTPS uses TLS as well, of course. Another thing to mention here is the PowerShell Downgrade attack. This is not enabled by default. However, we're disabling that feature and removing it in my script. And this is because, for example, PowerShell here, I think I might have done it on this one. But if I were to do get execution policy, currently I have it set to remote signed. That is what you want your execution policy set to. If the PowerShell Downgrade attack, what that allows you to do is if I do PowerShell version 2 and then execute a command, I would be executing that command using PowerShell 2, and this bypasses some of the modern protections, such as the execution policy. Also, there's a full language framework that gets used in PowerShell. If I were to disable that, a user can use an attacker can use PowerShell version 2 to still build .NET objects, even though I have the language mode restricted. I actually cover that a little bit more in my BHack 2020 presentation. I'll have a link to that in the video as well, in case you want to watch that. So, next with our unquoted service paths, the issue here, let me execute this command so you can see well, let's do this. Clear that, we go to, this is a command to discover unquoted services. By unquoted services, we mean a registry value for a service that does not have quotes around it in the path name variable, or in the path name value. And the reason for this is this space here without the quotes gets interpreted as an application or an execution program. So it tries to execute C program.exe. When that doesn't exist, then it moves on to C program files and goes on from there. And I used procmon here to kind of capture what that looks like, just so you can see. It's trying to execute the C program.exe file anytime I try to run the Vion service. Vion has, of course, patched this vulnerability after being notified of it in an older version. There are a few versions on now. I just used the old application as an example. This should not be taken as a slight against them. So that's the idea of unquoted service paths. What this does is let you know if any exist. If they do, what you need to do is go to regedit to open your registry. And then we would want to basically find where that service executes from and, whatchamacallit, where's my procmon here, and put quotations around it. And if we can see here, HKLM software, so I'm going to copy this value here, and copy, and that goes up to, if we go to my registry, I believe I copied from here. We'll do this. This is probably the easiest way to find it, so that everybody at home can do this too. Expand this, go up to the top. So if we go into HKey local machine, then we're going to go to system, or is it software? Software, we're looking for services is what we want. System, current control set, services, that's where we are. So then if we go down to V, our VEY, VEY service. All right, here we go. So now we can see my image path here. If I put quotations around this and click OK, I've now corrected that error. The only thing now is, since I've changed the registry value for the computer or the local machine, I need to restart the computer for those changes to apply. So that's the unquoted service path, and an attacker can use that to also escalate privilege on a machine as whoever that service is running as. Another thing I check here is group membership, and the reason for that is Windows suggests that you have a user account that does not have admin privileges that you sign into a computer with, and that you have a separate administrator account that you use to enter your credentials with anytime you need those admin permissions. So I offer you the ability to do that easily, where I create the username for you and add the user to the group so that you can follow those practices. You can also click no if you don't want to do that. I don't do that on my home computer. Instead, one of the main things that protects against is, I'll demonstrate that real quick, is for example, the FOD helper bypass method. And what this does is allows an attacker to bypass the user access control or UAC prompt, so that if you, for example, right now, if I try to open PowerShell as an admin, this is the user access control or UAC prompt. So here I have to click yes, and I can enter commands and stuff. And you can see here, these are full privileges on a machine, right? Now, if I'm just a normal user, actually, here just to show you, if I do who am I priv, these are my only user permissions. So if I were to use this FOD helper bypass method I created, I now have a PowerShell window open. I didn't have to fill anything out for the user access control prompt, and I have full privileges. So to protect against this, you need to set another registry value that basically ensures that the UAC prompt comes up no matter what. And anytime I go to restart the computer and do that, I get a UAC prompt that asks me if I'm sure I want to restart, because that's one of the things that uses this. Or if you prefer, you can enter your password every time, whatever you like doing better. Another thing here is the password vault that Windows has. So for example, if I use Internet Explorer and I'm saving passwords without using a password manager such as Bitwarden, I can execute this command here and I can see the Windows password vault. And I can even do this if let me copy all this, with normal user permissions. So I'm opening PowerShell here, who am I priv, you can see I have just basic permissions, and I can view this stored password from Internet Explorer. So that is why you don't want to save passwords there. The Harden Windows 10 script I have checks your vault to make sure there's nothing in there, and it will remove any of those entries if they are there and you want it to. Another thing here is logging. So what I'm doing here in the Harden Windows 10 script is I'm enabling command line logging, and this is so that in your event viewer, any commands executed in PowerShell get logged to the event log. If your computer ever gets infected by something, having this is very helpful to find out where things came from and what is being attempted to be done on the device. There's a couple other logging I enable, such as process creation, and a lot of this is logging. I haven't added too much in here yet, but I think I'm going to add some more from LogMD. I don't want to take away from that tool, is why I haven't added anything yet. I suggest using LogMD to enable all the, it's basically in a Windows event logging cheat sheet, they call it. And LogMD shows you how to enable all those protections and logging so that if your computer is infected, you're able to trace what could have happened, or if somebody else who's investigating for you can trace what is going on. So I suggest using them. I'm going to have a link to them in the description as well. But this is the main logging I'm setting up for you there. Data execution prevention. This is enabled by default. However, I'm doing this just to be redundant and ensure that it's on. And what this is for is it prevents execution from the buffer in your memory. The next thing I'm going to cover here is Windows auto updates. What I'm doing here is just simply turning them on so that download and install is set up. Windows Defender, we're ensuring that when Windows Defender performs scans, this is going to check zip files and other cabinet type files as well. So that's why we're turning this on. This is not on by default. Another thing here is PUA protection, or potentially unwanted program protection. This is not enabled by default either, and this prevents, for example, Windows from installing apps that you didn't tell it to install, like when it tries to install Candy Crush for you. And every time you go to remove it, then it gets installed again. This is what prevents that from happening. This is the default value. However, we're setting it just to make sure it's up. Disable behavior monitoring. We want to make sure that's enabled. And we're also enabling the Windows optional feature, Windows Defender Application Guard. And this is not on by default, so we're turning that on here for you. And I believe I was able to cover everything there that I wanted to cover. And yeah, so thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, or there's something you'd like to see covered more in another video, let me know and I'll make it the prime topic and cover it that way. Thanks for watching.